So there's a county in my state that has been sending an exorbitant amount of children handcuffed to the ER for psych evaluations. And it's bullshit. Fendi, like the bag. This is the I Refuse podcast. This is Mr. Fox, the I Refuse podcast. I'm back. In the last couple of seconds of the previous video, I brought up a question as to why there are schools, not only in my state but in this country, that are sending a lot of kids under the age of 5 to the ER in handcuffs. And here we are. So I was down here minding my business. Oh, hello. I'm Mr. Fox, the I Refuse podcast. Welcome back. If this is your first time to the channel, to anything near the I Refuse podcast, we typically tend to talk about pop culture, music, movies, and stuff like that. But really, the crux of the podcast is having discussions around social issues, cultural issues, and really put our own 2 cents into it. And as somebody that has come up in the grade school system, I felt it necessary to talk about this one particular thing because we've been outside for a long time, right? And one thing we notice is that the climate in teacher-student relationships, faculty administration, state sourcing, resourcing, financing, the whole realm of the education system has been pretty wild since I graduated from high school. Not saying that my growing up in the school system wasn't, super stellar. But definitely what's very telling these days is the response to otherwise just routine, day-to-day, we all come to expect these kind of situations. It's the handling of the kids that's most troubling to me. And how the people who are supposed to have the most maturity and be the most certified and the most professional resort to, in my opinion, damaging kids that age, damaging any child. So, welcome. There is a county in my state that it's been revealed recently that they have been sending children as young as 5 years of age and children in general from this one particular school over 100 times within the past calendar school year. And handcuffed, the police cruiser comes, pulls up to the school, handcuffs the kids, sends the kids to the ER for a psychiatric evaluation. It's later been discovered that schools across the country have been doing this for a while, to the tune of almost a range of 800 or so kids to even more. But the process has been used over the last 8 years. So in this particular county, in my state, there is what's called there's a petition of some kind, or a state law. Sorry, state law petitions for emergency evaluation, which is meant to be limited with to people with severe mental illness and considered an endangerment to other students and faculty abroad. Now, what's come out of that in reality is that some of these kids are reacting out of frustration to being bullied and being targeted in class and in school, and just childhood frustration. I would surmise, frustration from not being heard, frustration from not being understood, frustration from not being accepted. And as somebody that's been through the grade school system, I can give you a bevy of experiences that either I've gone through or I've experienced in the same classroom with other kids, that over 95% of the time, a teacher's response to a child, a teenager, a preteen, specifically in grade school and middle school, is when they are acting up or acting out or being a little bit disruptive, within an earshot of the first couple of sounds, the first reaction is always to send that child to the principal's office or sit them in the hallway, away from the other kids, away from an opportunity to educate them. There's little to no patience in dealing with this particular child at this time. And I went to school with a lot of weirdos. Like, going to school, public school, you get a real experience, and weirdos probably wasn't the right term in this climate, but that's just what it is. Like, a lot of different kids from different areas and different realities. A lot of latchkey kids, single kids from single parent homes, and interesting kids that are not developed in some way. But this is what school is. So, for this state law to be enacted, and this is the data that's come out of that. From that data, people have discovered that the percentage, the greater or higher percentage of children being sent to the ER for psych evaluations, handcuffed from the classroom, are black children. Now, for the longest time, longer than I've had the podcast, and I've even talked about it on the podcast along the way, is the handling of black lives. Not just adults, but also especially children. And over the last 5 or 10 years, I've seen a lot of stories coming out as to how grade school children and middle-aged children are handled in a classroom setting, to where, the teacher up front is expecting some kind of compliance, not getting it, whether it's the kid is refusing to leave the classroom, not physically assaulting anybody, or if it's an adult, 18, 19, 20-year-old child, and the teacher is a sub, and the student is just simply asking questions, the sub is not adequately answering the questions about the assignment, the teacher's not liking the direction or the nature or the tone of the conversation, police officers are pulled in, they arrest the child, and violently at that. We need to start having a discussion around de-escalation, emotional intelligence, and this is more on the shoulders of the adult in the classroom. The teacher that's supposed to be the leader, and the principals and the faculty that claim to be telling communities, oh, we're here to inspire and motivate the kids. Yet you have in that pool in the faculty teachers that are just more interested in getting a check. This is just another day of the week for me. I'm not entirely invested, nor do I care about some of these kids. Like, you're not having a dialogue or a conversation to figure out what's going on or understand where the child is coming from. You just want them gone so you can move on with your day and your life. But when you call in like resource officers who have guns and flashlights, and you call in actual police officers, which is miles ahead of calling the principal down here, calling other faculty to address this matter, you got to be aware as to the psychological damage that you're doing to kids these days. So going into this article and going into this new reality that this is where we are as a society. And we long should have had a conversation about the distinction between this is a place to learn and this is a place that's my job and my career, and I need to, as a teacher, as a principal, as a member of the faculty, place a line in the sand where I'm the teacher, you're the student. I need to get it out of my head that this is not a place where I'm to babysit your kids, but also not disrespect children. And honestly, in my opinion, calling the police and causing such psychological damage on kids is disrespectful of the child. I'm a dare kid. I don't know where things kind of went awry. Like, nobody from this channel is saying, yeah, you should have more, you should bring that back. Like, yes, we should definitely bring, more police officers back and meet with the kids and stuff like that. No, because clearly the climate is at a point where, to a degree, we can't trust them. We can't trust 12. So that's not going to work. But clearly, when we go as the adults in the classroom from 0 to level 5, because we don't have time for this. Like, you're supposed to school the kids another way. But here we are in society where this is now an option. And the reality is, it's more the black kids facing this in schools. You know how trauma-inducing it is to see a police officer? Most likely with backup, come into your classroom and arrest you as a person of color in this country. And then when you think about what the state law says and how other people interpret it, that this option is only meant for people with mental health issues who are a threat or a problem towards other kids, and then most of the kids are black. It gives this implication that we have mental health issues. And here's the other thing. When you resort to that being what? The other option, the last option, repeatedly, people are going to realize you're misusing it. And when you misuse something, dare I say it, you open the door for the state coming in, the government coming in to take the school back from you. And then I started to think about it. I'm like, on the one hand, I understand the frustrations. Like, you're saying you claim you don't have the resources to, I guess, adequately serve the problem or remedy or resolve the problem. Yet, you want more pay. And this kind of thing is not up to us. Like somewhere along the lines, if we're at this point where you're sending more kids in handcuffs and then to get psychiatrically evaluated, my thing is this. Don't you gotta get the parents involved at some point? Because I read up on some of the schools out of this county, Wicomico County, and I'm like, this doesn't come off like a school with one of those developmental schools. So, what do you, why are you doing this? You know what I mean? Like, what, and it would beg me to think, are y'all specifically targeting black kids? But back to my point before I just cut my own self off. Where are the parents? Because I honestly feel like you would have to, as a parent, the school would have to run through you a phone call, a Zoom call, a meeting. There's paperwork or something involved to grant a school permission to get your child psychiatric evaluations. Like, once we get to a point that you're doing all of this because you don't want to deal with the kids, it makes me wonder, like, maybe you're not cut out to be a teacher. And it makes me wonder what the path to this point looks like. Like, how many times did you meet with the parents? Because trust and believe, in the DARE era, in the late 80s, early 90s, parent-teacher night was a thing. Parent-teacher conferences was a thing. And if your mother, if you're from a single parent household and your mother works during the day or has to work third shift, but she had to come straight to the school after getting off of work before going home to address your badass shit. And it could be anything from you're talking too much in class, you're being a little bit disruptive, like more parents were hands on. And a parent teacher conference was all that was needed for you to fall back in line. But when did it get to this point? Like, I have a theory as to when. You know, they probably looked at the climate elsewhere in the country. It was just like, oh, well. But it's like you're kind of taking the power out of the teacher's hands. And what kind of workshops are you giving the teachers as a district, as an administration? Problem resolution, situational de-escalation, emotional intelligence. Like, what are the workshops and the is that part of the recertification process? Like, it's not that hard. Like, I understand Wacomico County is on the other side of the state of Maryland. You know, far from the cities. You know, dare I say it could it could very well be Amish country, but that's only me being petty. Like, they're not of the real world, right? They're not expecting to come into work thinking, oh well, they're not used to, I guess, the level of shit that comes with being a kid. And dare I say, there's probably not a lot of kids that look like me over there. I know the few times I've gone over there, and not to like mess around, because I'm like, look, I don't have enough street. But anyway, see a tangent. So it just makes me wonder, like, y'all could have, y'all allowed, I guess, the state and the government to take the responsibility out of the teachers and the faculty's hands to adequately empower and embolden the teachers and educate and inform the teachers in line with where we are as a society by giving them an easy out at the detriment of Black children. Thus locking us out of education, the necessity of it, thus keeping us behind a certain line. Like, you gotta actually think about it. This state law is the first step to involuntarily admit Black children to psychiatric hospitals. It's like screw time out, screw sitting in the hallway behind the desk to cool off. Like, bypass the guidance counselor, bypass calling the parents and having a couple of conferences. Like, you want to admit these kids to psychiatric hospitals? under a state law specifically reserved for people with mental health issues. You want to do all this for misbehavior. And I can go into a whole conversation as to the connection of capitalism to privately owned hospitals, psychiatric wards, and how satisfying a quota such as that's of hospitals and how that translate into more funding, just like it would translate into quotas with jails, and how that plays into this similar data as to how it's more black people and people of color going into jails than our white counterparts. Like it's all interrelated. It's all interrelated, and how systemic that it is. And that's a list of reasons as to why I have this podcast to talk about that kind of stuff. Like this isn't rocket science. Like there's a thread that connects all of this. I'm telling you, y'all, there's a whole world of information that news and news pundits won't tell you. They don't have the time or the range, really. And it's in the history. It's in the history of this country. And one thing I've always said on the I Refuse podcast is racism still exists. It's just people are more adept at, or not as adept at being covert about it. It's definitely nuanced, and this is one of those glaring examples of it. Like, could you imagine? You drop your kids off at school. Your kids are being bullied. Your kids are frustrated. And to be an adult and not be capable to handle emotions of a person 2-3 times smaller than you. It makes me wonder, do teachers really care? Like, whatever happened to that? You drop your kids off, they're frustrated, and more often than not, there are multiple instances. This is definitely like building up. Like there's something that's been going on for a while behind the scenes at school. And teachers can be very unfair in grading. Teachers can be unreasonable. That's a reality that is even in college. And and students are very, very smart. But it's like we got to have a discussion around, accountability for the teachers and the faculty. Like, what are y'all also bringing into that classroom that these students are just not responding well to you? But I bet if you start putting teachers' pensions on the line and putting their certifications on the line, on the cutting board, like there has to be a checks and balances in play. There has to be an overhaul of, you have to satisfy or keep this particular standard or rating throughout the school year. Because not only are you supposed to teach, but you're also supposed to inspire and create an environment that motivates kids to learn. Take your ego out of it and actually make the children the focus of the experience. Even when I was growing up, a lot of prideful teachers. Especially by the time I got to high school and then to college. College, it was just like, is this a classroom or a sweatshop? And maybe students in middle school, high school are unaware that the guidance counselor, the principal, everybody up there in their front office that has a job up there are supposed to be there for you. But this is where we are right now. And this is very troubling. Like, they're sending kids to the ER in handcuffs to possibly, most likely, involuntarily admit them to psychiatric hospitals. This is Mr. Fox, the Refuse podcast. Whoo, it's crazy. I Refuse podcast available wherever you get your podcasts. You know, the YouTube channel's still here. Let's see, I Refuse podcast After Dark, The Usual Suspects. 5 seasons of the I Refuse podcast is available wherever you get your podcasts. You know, we're busting it out over here on the YouTube channel. The link to everything is on the profile. It's on the Twitter at I Refuse Podcast. I'm Mr. Fox. Thank you for joining me, and we will catch you guys later. Fendi, like the bag. This is the I Refuse